So the general thesis I want to present is that distributed systems are always better. What that means is distributed versus centralized, the idea that a piece of technology or any other kind of system is located in one place or has a single point of failure. Things that have redundancy, things that are spread out, are much less likely to have bad things happen. Everything breaks eventually, so if you have anything that you care about, like electricity, you probably want to have redundancies in there. And having an electrical power grid run by the electric company with, say, a big power plant in the center that then has wires go out is great. You probably want multiple power plants in case one goes down. And you probably want a bunch of redundant wires in case somebody runs their car into a telephone pole. That's great, but what you really probably want is at least one power plant in every town, and ideally you want every house to have its own power supply. So you have solar panels or wind, and so there is no grid to depend on, and you don't need the wires at all. And once you remove the wires as a dependency, then it's much harder for a house to lose power. The same thing is absolutely true with digital systems. So when we put everything in one place, it makes it extremely vulnerable to accidental damage, to being overloaded, or to any number of other things happening. But aside from the technical problems, when everything is in one place, that generally means it's controlled by a large corporation who are the only people with the resources to control, build, and manage these sorts of things. That means that you're open to, in the case of communication systems, intermediation, which just means if I want to send a message to you and I have to get someone else's permission first, or I'm using someone else's system, if they don't like what I'm saying to you, they don't like me, they don't like you, or they just have other motivations, our communication is now vulnerable to a variety of things. Now that could take something, the form of censorship, where they really just don't want a message getting out. I left Facebook as a user about 2 years ago when about 80% of the stories, the links I was trying to post, were being blocked. They would not allow them to go through because they said, this link has been reported as spam or malicious. And those were almost all posts that had something to do with a political angle, especially about centralized data services. Whether that's intentional censorship or whether it's just accidental, it's a communication system that's absolutely necessary, whether for me personally or professionally, or for an organization that I'm involved with or a movement. And now suddenly we've become dependent on a tool that chooses what we can and can't say. This is really a bad idea. Well, we'd all agree that there are certain things that ought not to be said. You shouldn't yell fire in a crowded theater. The idea that a developer or a marketer is the one making those decisions for millions of people is just insane. The other major vulnerability here is eavesdropping. They allow all the communications to go through, but by monitoring what we say, you can build up an archive of information about someone. And people fundamentally in most Western societies have a basic right to privacy. I don't think anyone's embarrassed of using the bathroom, but I just used the restroom in this building and they all have doors on them individually. There are some things that we all know happen, no one's embarrassed about, no one thinks are wrong, but we think we have a right to privacy. When we think about the terrifying notion of like a 1984-based world, it's an interesting mental experiment, but it's not realistic. Anything that involves a bunch of cameras or a bunch of audio surveillance equipment, and then in another room you have one person who's staring at each one of these screens, that doesn't scale well. You'd have to have at least half the population monitoring the other half at any given time, so you could only effectively monitor a very small group of people. You couldn't analyze this. Human-based monitoring doesn't work. In the digital age, these processes can be automated completely. You don't need a person anywhere in the loop other than to write the software, which means eavesdropping isn't just about having a little bit of privacy lost. It's about everything that you do and say and think being somewhere that can be analyzed or mined or sold, or just out of your control, none of which are acceptable to me. A lesser discussed issue, but one that's got a lot of traction recently, is ownership. So if I want to pick up the phone and call one of you, the phone company, generally speaking, isn't going to claim that they own that conversation. They don't own that recording. They do effectively need me to permit them to record my voice, transfer it across wires, and replay it somewhere else, because I essentially own copyright on what I'm saying. This doesn't come up a lot in phone lawsuits. But when it's an email or a photo that I'm posting to a service, it does, because I have copyright on a particular piece of content. This is just when you make something, when you write a poem or take a picture or write an essay, you own copyright on that, which means no one else can use it without your permission except in specific ways. If I want a service to show those pictures or those essays or those poems to someone else, they need my permission to be exempt from that copyright. Everybody's used a digital service. Do we have any holdouts? Like anybody not using the internet these days? Great. So everybody here's clicked through terms of service for something at some point. Who's ever read the complete terms of service or privacy policy? For the rest of you, like you're opting into a binding legal contract. It might behoove you to find out what that contract says. Although these things are usually many, many pages long, they're very complex, and if you're not a lawyer, you're probably not qualified to evaluate it. But if you want to give Instagram your photos, and you want them to be able to store them or accept them or share them, you have to give them legal permission. So it's not wrong for them to want what's usually described as a non-exclusive, worldwide, irrevocable, transferable license to display your content. That's a mouthful, and it comes with a lot of baggage attached. What it means is if I took a bunch of pictures and decided that I was going to upload them to Instagram, that's great, and they can show them to all of you. It means that if Instagram gets bought by Facebook, they can transfer that display license to their new corporate owners. That's fine too most of the time, except I don't have an option to back out. Say, I'm fine sharing with Instagram, but actually I don't want to share it with Facebook. Once I've shared it with Instagram, if they had a transferable license, we're done. It also means that if I were to then try to bind all of these photos together and sell them as a fine art book, I'd be completely able to do that, but the good people at Instagram could undercut my costs and sell the exact same book at a lower price because they also have a right to distribute this content. Distributed systems are better because I don't have to give a lot of other people permission for how I'm going to let them use something. I don't have to let anyone listen to what I'm saying. And they're really, really hard to break. So some systems break just because they're complex and they have moving pieces. Others are intentionally broken by someone who doesn't like the system, doesn't like how it's being used. Our systems are a lot harder to build. You have to have a lot of different disconnected pieces that don't have like a shared global understanding of what's going on. They just know about their piece. You're basically architecting a system, intending for various pieces to fail. This is really complicated, but it's worked really well. Can anybody think of major digital distributed systems that have been very successful? Absolutely, BitTorrent. Very distributed. What else? Absolutely, they have a lot of technical elements, yeah. Big stuff. What digital things do you guys use every day? The internet on its own, absolutely. Like the IP stack, the way we send packets around, was built by the military so that if a bunch of cities got hit by nuclear weapons, you'd still be able to communicate between the ones that were still around. The internet itself is distributed, as are most of the other things on it. Anybody use IRC chat ever? It's a little nerdy, but the web on its own, like the World Wide Web, which often gets conflated with the internet, but is a separate thing. Has anybody who had AOL in like 1992 will remember AOL before AOL had the web as a feature? Email is fairly distributed. Usenet, anybody? This is an old one. I mean, it's still kicking around. I love that. All right. Anybody think of any really failed distributed systems digitally? I mean, all right, so let me back up. When I say failed, like, I'll be nice. Not as successful as we would have liked them to be. So I assume some of you have heard of previous, like, let's decentralize social diaspora. Anybody diaspora? Remember this? Front page of the New York Times like 3-4 years ago? Like open source Facebook. A successful project, it exists. People use it. They raise a lot of money. They're still working on it, but anybody here use Diaspora? Who uses Facebook? There's been a lot of attempts at doing a distributed communication system that's a modern digital one that lets us do the same kinds of things we're used to on centralized systems. But they're usually very politically motivated, and none of them have really happened. When we look at this list, every one of these was invented at the latest in like 1993. It's 2013 now, so it's been a little while. There haven't been a lot of new additions. This is a few, but nothing huge. So there have been a lot of these that have gone badly. I don't want to embarrass anybody, and most people, even if their projects failed, made an awesome contribution to the space. But these are not only hard to build technically, but they very rarely achieved massive success. There's a variety of reasons why this is true. So I imagine if you haven't already, over the course of this series or just your time being interested in this field, you'll start hearing about some people's brand new technology to distribute things, decentralize, users own everything, et cetera, which are all awesome goals, but they have not done that well successfully. The first big one is there's a huge difference between software and protocols. What that means, technically speaking, a protocol is like a piece of paper. It's just a document that explains how two things talk to each other. That's it. There's no code, there's no application, there's no server, there's nothing. It's just a set of human-readable information that any programmer could use, could implement that protocol as a piece of software. Software are apps that you download on your phone. They're the actual things that run on computers. So when we talk about the 4 success stories, HTTP is the web. When we say the web, it's a set of technologies, most specifically one called HTTP. You know, in your browser you type in HTTP. That's that. SMTP is email. NNTP is Usenet. And IRC is actually just IRC. The 4 big ones that we think of are all protocols. They are not a piece of software that was distributed. Many people wrote software based on these instructions. So all that a protocol is just a set of basic documents that anyone can write the code to support. But it means that you aren't tied to a single piece of software. There's no licensing around who can use it, generally. So there have been some other problems here. People have issues working together sometimes. A lot of these projects had really limited scope. There was an attempt, and it's by all means relatively successful, a service called OStatus, which is a protocol, broadly speaking, for an open Twitter, essentially. Open source distributed Twitter. Has about 2-3 million users. A lot of them are paying. It's a decent service, but it had a very limited scope because all they wanted to do was make something that worked just like Twitter but was a little bit more open. And this was like 4 years ago when Twitter was a lot less than it is now. What's interesting about the 4 big ones I mentioned is that they're very small building blocks that you can make any kind of system out of. Open source Twitter is not something that you can make a lot of things on that weren't already imagined by Twitter. The other scary thing about protocols is that once you design this document, they live forever. HTTP is just about to hit version 2.0, and it's over 20 years old. The others are older and have similar evolutions. If you start with something that has a very narrow vision and can't be used as a general purpose component in other systems, it tends not to be widely adopted because the reality is no one who invented the web or email could have imagined it being used in the way it's used today. In the case of something very narrowly scoped like open source Twitter, that's more challenging. This is a field that attracts some interesting people who make some great contributions, but there are some hard problems. And once you find a solution to one of these hard problems, it usually takes a couple of years to sort it out well. You get obsessed with that solution. You think that this is the best thing in the world because if you find a hard problem, you think about it all the time until you eventually solve it or get very upset. If you solve it, you think that you have contributed something wonderful to humanity and our knowledge of the world, and for the rest of time, you think that everyone needs to use your solution or even care about your problem. The solutions are actually less interesting than the problems people try to solve. These are projects. These are largely either open source or very corporate projects. There's a lot of different governance models, just like how people are going to work together, who's going to control it, how it's going to evolve, just organizational issues. Unfortunately, engineers historically are not great at these things, and so the people who are often inspired to go build something are not necessarily the best people to run it long term. So let's set all that aside and just talk about what the world would be like if we were starting from scratch with a distributed social thing. All I mean there is any currently centralized service, so Dropbox or Flickr or Evernote, anything, and these are all great services, by the way, but they're centralized and they happen to be commercial as well, which I don't think is bad at all. But they're a centralized closed source model, which means you can't set up your own Dropbox. You can download an application from them, which runs on your computer, and sends copies of your files to their servers, actually Amazon servers. It works great. There's nothing wrong with that. But there are some cases that it's inappropriate for. Their encryption isn't awesome. So I have my tax returns on Dropbox. This is not a wise idea. Like, it's in general, it's going out a ways. More importantly, I mentioned it's running on Amazon's web services, which is, again, a great product for a lot of things, but not for everything. Terms of service stack up on top of each other. So Dropbox, actually, as a company, has to sign terms of service with Amazon to use their products. That means that anything that Dropbox wants to give you as terms as a user have to be a subset of Amazon's terms. So let's say something simple and obvious and good, which is if the federal government comes in with a search warrant to Amazon, Amazon is going to let them see whatever they want. That means that Dropbox, being based on that service, can't say to you, if the government comes looking for your files, we won't give them to them. They aren't even in control of it. And even if they were, they're legally obligated to Amazon to do so. You just have to be aware of what we're building on top of. But for some people, Dropbox isn't a viable service for whatever reason. And because it's centralized, they can't, say, use the Dropbox app, but with a different hosting provider. Something like email is entirely movable. If you're using Gmail and don't like that, you can go to Yahoo. You can set up your own email server. And if you're a Yahoo mail user and you want to email somebody on Gmail or on Outlook or on their own email server, it's exactly the same as if you email somebody else who's also on Yahoo. So if we think about what a better world would be like if we were kind of building it from scratch, I think we can all agree, like, users should end up being in control of their own stuff. This comes down to licenses and enforcement. Who's heard of Creative Commons licenses? Okay. So I mentioned copyright earlier. Copyright's great for some things and terrible for others, but anything you create, you own copyright on. So if you want to allow other people to use your stuff in a way that's good, say, you can do whatever you want with this, I want it to be shared, but I want credit for it. Historically, you would have had to sign a contract with every one of these people. That's insane. We have the internet now. There's better ways. So something called Creative Commons licenses were created that have a very narrow set of controls. So you can do very specific things with any media that is Creative Commons licensed. So if you take photos and you share them online, you have copyright and no one can use them without your permission. If you put a Creative Commons license on those photos, you can actually give everyone permission to use them in certain ways. Say, you can use them on any non-commercial product, or you can use them anywhere you want, but you have to attribute the authorship of those photos to me. Fine. And that's, yeah.
It's a key idea. And in the great world of the beyond, it might make sense. But in our world, I put it to you that if you look at economic let's say, most of the things that are created are not owned by the people who push the keys. They are really not controlled in the user domain. The Creative Commons doesn't exist for AT&T or...
Absolutely.
So most of the material we have is not copyright owned by people.
For sure. I agree. I think Creative Commons is a great idea. I think it works really well for a very narrow set of things. If you want to share photos online, Creative Commons is great. If you want to do much more than that, it's far too limiting, and frankly, it hasn't been tested that well legally, and Creative Commons content is overwhelmingly abused. Newspapers around the world will illegally reprint people's blog articles. There's no enforcement mechanism built in, so you still have to file a lawsuit. It's very limited in its ability. We probably want something with way better licenses and enforcement, and we probably also want people to be able to create their own licenses that say, if I send you something and then I ask you to delete it later, you have to delete it because it could be incriminating to me. I'm willing to share certain information with you, but only under certain terms. We kind of need Lego blocks. We need the ability to have a bunch of very, very small pieces that we can connect and build up on an individual level to make these. And we also need for this not to be a burden, because now this sounds like we have to make a new contract every time we want to do something. So we probably want, I should say, I'll look at anything that people want to share with me with these as the maximum terms. I will totally delete something if someone asks me to. I will absolutely not keep this on a server I don't control. I will not tell anyone if you told me it was private. But that's it. I won't also do other things. I won't pay you for that content. I won't promise to give you access to anything that I produce that's derivative of your work. And so if I set up a basic set of rules, I probably want basically my computer to negotiate, if you will, with everyone else. Basically act as a filter that will allow any content that matches the rules that I'm willing to abide by through, but keeps me from entering into a contract with anyone else. So we want something in that space. We want to be able to work with sensitive data. Most of us probably take digital pictures now. A lot of film users still out there. 3 of you take digital pictures. You fall asleep quite yet. We want to be able to work with information that's scary to work with right now. There's not a lot of web startups that make, say, health or financial data aggregators, because these are deeply regulated spaces. Governments are in control of things, and it's a legal hassle to work with. It's not something 1 or 2 people are going to hack on their own time. You need some lawyers. So we probably want to be able to do something cool with this. So everybody familiar with like 23andMe? It's a company that you mail your DNA to. They sequence a rather small portion of your genome, just a few genes they know code for something that's interesting, and they keep your DNA on file. This is incredibly valuable information to your doctor, to a pharmaceutical company, and to you as you choose your best medical treatment. It can tell you if you're going to have a better or worse reaction to certain drugs, whether you've inherited certain diseases from family members. This is really important information. But it's also really scary information to have out in the wild. You have to trust that company a lot. Similarly, I would love to record trails of everywhere I ever go. So basically just constant recording of GPS everywhere I travel. Now let's combine those two. If I had 23andMe had sequenced a significant portion of my genome, and let's pretend that there's a gene that tells me if I have this gene and I'm around radiation in the environment, I'm 5 times more likely than the average person to develop cancer from that radiation because I have a particular gene. Secondarily, let's say I was traveling around, and my phone is constantly recording my location, let's say. And let's say I traveled to Japan during the nuclear reactor at Fukushima, that horrible disaster, radiation leaking everywhere. Based on, I'm sure someone recorded where the radiation was at different times, when the wind came in. And so based on knowing my precise location at that time, it can say, they could tell me whether or not I was exposed to radiation. If so, what kind and how much. I could then look at 23andMe and say, this gene, based on these environmental circumstances, says I probably did or didn't develop an environmentally triggered cancer. Hugely important information, especially to have in advance of going in to see a physician or before symptoms actually develop. Is anybody here willing to record their location persistently all the time to Google? How about Facebook? Apple? Any other company? So we've got 2 people in the room who are willing to record their location all the time. But this could be life-saving information, or it could exonerate you from a crime that you're accused of committing because you now have an alibi. There's dozens of ways this could be immensely valuable. But we aren't saving this because we don't trust anyone with it. Would you be willing to record your location and keep it like on a USB stick at home, people? If we had a technical solution that allowed people to do that, we could start collecting more interesting data. I don't ever want to send really, really sensitive information to anyone else, even with even legal protections that are either governmental or a contract I have with them. I don't want to share some of this. We can't do purpose-built apps for a lot of things now. What I mean is, the Twitter ecosystem was amazing because they allowed any developer to make Twitter apps. So you get something like TweetDeck, which is great for big marketing brands that are managing all the information they get in. And then you have something small on your iPhone like Tweety or the official Twitter app that's great if you're an individual user reading tweets. Phenomenal. Same underlying product, same centralized Twitter product, totally different applications, different ways of displaying that data. So if you're an activist, you may be very concerned about certain kinds of information coming in on Twitter. You can build an app for that, and that's fine. Twitter's since heavily restricted their terms of service. We can't do this with data that's in a lot of systems. It's the exception rather than the rule that a system exists that allows us to do anything fun with it. Let's say that we are in a very repressive regime, and we want to have everybody in our activist cause meet up at a particular location, but suddenly to leave when we know that the police or the army is coming or when they're using tear gas. We want to be able to have all of us tracking locations constantly and find out, say, when a member of our movement is nearby. There's a great service that launched in about 2005 called Looped, which was, it constantly recorded your location to a centralized server, and then if you have your friends imported, they had the same app running on theirs, and so if you and I happen to be both in anywhere within a mile of each other, it's going to let us know. So I'm not constantly telling you where I am. You're not constantly telling me where you are. We're both constantly telling Looped, and then Looped will let us know if we happen to be in the same place. So, oh, we're both in a city that we aren't normally in, and then it lets us know and we can get together for coffee. It's awesome service, but really, really creepy. I couldn't get anyone I knew to sign up for it. I thought it was the best thing in the world. Nobody wanted anything to do with me. That service would be amazing for people who were dissidents in a terrifying regime, but not if it's phoning home to a company that is gonna be able to sell this information. Or if I'm a horrible regime, I'm just gonna set up a shell company. I'm gonna buy this nice little web startup. They don't know they're selling it to anyone bad, and now I'm gonna go shoot everyone. This is a really, really bad idea. But if we had distributed systems that were entirely user-controlled, this is not only easy, but it's essentially risk-free. And there are some fun ways of doing this in software. So we want to be able to share sensitive information selectively with other people. But if I tell you a secret, I want to tell you, not the telephone company. Mostly we want this to be safe to use. Who's familiar with Tor? Okay. For everybody who isn't, Tor is middle school for the internet. Here's what I mean. Instead of me going up to someone and asking them a question directly, I'm going to ask a friend to ask another friend to ask another friend to ask that person for me. That's all it is. But every step along the way is encrypted. And I get a message here from someone, and they tell me who the next step in the chain to deliver it is to. I hand it off to this person. This chain could be an infinite number of people long. It could be 1,000 people long. Each of us are doing this. It could be that the person who handed it to me is the originator of the message, and the person I'm handing it to is the intended receiver. But most importantly, I, as someone in the middle, don't know. I can't differentiate the endpoint or the, I can differentiate the endpoint if it's out on the regular internet. But I can't tell if the person I got it from is the originator of the message. That means that we can, and also I can't see the contents of the message. That's really interesting on its own. This is how people in China get access to websites that are blocked, et cetera, because as long as they have any external internet access outside the country, they can, say, talk to somebody in India who talks to someone in Britain, who talks to someone in Germany, who talks to someone in Denmark. And the person in Denmark is able to access the NewYorkTimes.com. They then send the message back in the opposite way, and this all happens in a couple of seconds. It's a really slow way to browse the internet, but it's extremely safe. You can look at content that might be illegal or physically blocked from you in other ways. But Tor has an extra feature, which are called Tor hidden services. So instead of saying, I want to go to the NewYorkTimes.com, which is great for protecting my anonymity of visiting it, but doesn't protect the New York Times, who, if the US government decides they don't like the New York Times, they can go unplug their internet, blow up their servers, close down the building, whatever. You can tell, with Tor, you know the final destination is transparent if you're auditing it, but the originator isn't. There's another way of doing this that actually blocks both ends. So instead of saying nytimes.com, I go to like nytimes23146.onion. If you go to a .onion address in your normal web browser, nothing's happening. If you go there in Tor, it knows that it's actually a secret address inside of the Tor network. What's fascinating is no one can find the physical server that it's running on. Nobody. So it means that you don't know who's requesting it, and you don't know what they're requesting. And even if you did, there's a service called Silk Road right now. Anybody familiar with Silk Road? It's Amazon.com for illegal drugs. You want to go buy a kilo of cocaine, you can do it on Silk Road. You can use something called Bitcoin, which is a digital cryptocurrency. It's basically digital cash, so it's untraceable. And you can access Silk Road. It's Silk Road, some combination of numbers and letters, .onion. If you were to open up Firefox right now on your computer and you weren't running Tor, you can't get to Silk Road. It's only accessible through Tor. What this means is no one knows where the server is. The FBI and the DEA really, really, really don't like Silk Road. They want it gone immediately. There's another one. They had another one for a while that allowed you to buy guns online. Same way. Totally untraceable. And they send this stuff through the U.S. mail because we don't open the mail in this country. So you can have a complete chain that you can be buying cocaine from somebody in Colombia. It will go through the U.S. mail. And you bought it with cash, essentially. So no element of this is traceable. And they can't find the server to unplug it. It's not possible. That's a slightly nefarious example. But what if everything we did was like this? So if I have an unpopular opinion and I don't tell you my name and I don't tell you where this is, you can't shut it down. You can't tell me to be quiet unless you happen to hit me with a bus, but you wouldn't know that it was me. There's no way to get there. And if we're running everything inside a network like this, no. So how do we build the kind of world that we want? First off, it has to be protocol-based. The big challenge in building software versus protocols, Diaspora was an awesome project. And actually, like most of the Google Plus design seems to be inspired by it. It's a really well visually designed piece of software. It's a great application to use. It's a nice experience. They also had to create the Diaspora protocol that handled how different people talk to each other, and that isn't so great. They were trying to solve a lot of problems at once. So how do we make something that's a lot like Facebook? How do we make it open? How do we make it distributed? How do we protect users' rights? And by the way, we need to make some technical elements of this all work. That's a lot of problems for anyone to solve, even if you're an amazing, awesome person. It's probably enough to say, let's solve one element of this really well and let other people solve things really well. The people who are politically motivated may not be the people with the technical skills. People with technical skills may not be the ones who make great, gorgeous iPhone apps. You get a commercial app and it's usually awesome. You get something that's open source and it's usually crazy looking because people with politics, just by virtue of they're a small portion of the population. So how many people with politics also are really great graphic designers? That's limited. So we want to be able to break this up. We want to distribute our efforts. This is the core of it. We need a protocol like HTTP that powers the web or SMTP that powers mail. And we need that to be very open and very available. We need to also remember that whatever we build, we're stuck with forever, like at least 20 or 30 years. So we can't change any major elements of it. So it has to be very general purpose. We want it to work in real time. I saw the Zero Dark 30 movie last week, and it reminded me that when Osama bin Laden was killed, I experienced the whole thing on Twitter. I saw it on Twitter about 40 minutes before anybody started reporting it in the mainstream news, and about 2 hours before the White House confirmed it. You're able to see that through this giant stream of public posts that you're able to search in real time. Within a couple of seconds of posting a tweet, it ends up on their servers, so you've got great real-time search. Historically, that's been solely the domain of centralized services, because if you don't have all of the things going to one place, how do I distribute one piece of information to everyone in the world in a couple of seconds? That's insane. That's not going to happen. But real-time communication is incredibly important, and it's amazing. So imagine if you could do something like Twitter real-time search, but for all kinds of media. So for something like blog posts would be fairly straightforward, but how about for photos? Show me all the pictures being taken right now that have a cat in them. It's easy enough to analyze photos to see if there's a cat, but you need to have all the photos going through something that can analyze them. Historically, when you do web search, the way Google works is they have a robot, a software robot, that goes out across the internet and tries to find all the websites. And then the analogy is basically, if your house was a website, every 2 hours to 2 months, they're going to send a postcard to your mailbox and say, do you have anything new in your house? If so, please send it back to me. Send a copy of whatever you have back. That works pretty well for the web, which doesn't change that often, with the exception of like news sites. Most of these things are pretty static. It doesn't work well for social content where a few seconds matters, let alone weeks or months. So we need to have everything in one place, but not in one place. We need the benefits of it being co-located, but in a distributed system. We absolutely need the right to privacy. Public content is awesome, and it's used in a lot of dissident movements. It's used in a lot of cases where people just want to be sharing something. But you have a right to privacy as a human being, and we need this to be supported. We want it to be Tor-friendly. We'd like to be able to run these things as hidden services, so if you're saying something that some people don't agree with, they don't have a lot of recourse. They can't find you, they can't find the service, they can't stop the signal. We want to be able to build applications on top of it, but we don't want applications to be the thing itself. And we have no idea where this is going to evolve in the long term. So we want the people who are building this stuff, the developers of applications later on, come up with an awesome new idea to be able to extend our existing protocol to do that, which has happened with most of HTTP continues to evolve, but it doesn't specify really what kind of information you can send over it. You can send any file. So there weren't a lot of images on the early web. Who was on the web before 1997? Wow, who's on the web before 2000? Everyone is on the web today, yeah? Just more recently? Images back in the day, rich media, meant not video. It meant like a little tiny like animated GIF that was pixelated. This was really low tech. My first internet connection didn't have pictures. It was text only. And that was HTTP too. But it took a while for it to evolve into something that's more like the very rich world we know today, because developers were able to extend on this and add new kinds of content. We want to solve the license problem, or at least move it forward, because like the way we have terms of service right now is crazy. You have to either accept or not use a service. You have to either accept the terms of service or go home. We probably want something like collective bargaining that allows us to exchange information back and forth. If there's 100 million people who say, I would use your service if you had this term in it, that's meaningful, but right now we don't have a good way of doing that. And frankly, the 1960s organizational tactics of we'll have a petition and try to change, and I'm really not picking on them. I was just there earlier today, Facebook's mind. I see a version of this talk there. So here's what we're working on. We've tried to do all of this, and we spent most of the past year on like the 0.1 version of it. It's called Tent, and it's a protocol that's meant to solve all of these problems and does quite well. So we have real-time search for all posts, all kinds of media across everything. Anyone, just like email, can either run their own server or they can use a hosting provider. We run a hosting provider as well as write the open source software for it. The protocol is content agnostic. So you could build something like Twitter on top of it, which was the proof of concept that we built. So it's just microblogging. You could build something much more complicated like Dropbox. You could build something like Loop, the location service I talked about. All of these are, the protocol doesn't care about it. It's very, very, very open. So we spent a while, we looked at every service that we currently used or had thought of and said, how would we build this on Tent to make sure it would work? All content is broken down into a post type. Post types are made up by developers, so a photo or a blog or a location are post types. And that's completely extensible, but it's also broken down by licenses. So every piece of content has the option to have a license. So when you find, you want to like follow me on Tent, you see what kinds of posts I make. And let's say I make like tweet style posts, microblogs, and photos. You say, okay, I want all of your photos, but I don't want your tweets. Don't send those to me. Secondly, of my photos, I have 3 different kinds. 1, normal photos, nothing interesting. 2, a boring Creative Commons license that says if you reuse this, you have to attribute it to me. And 3, if I ask you to delete this, you have to delete it within 10 days. I'm not showing you any of that content. I'm just saying I have photos, and I have 3 categories of photos. Which categories do you want? All, none, some, you get to pick. And so if you say, I want your photos, and I want the first 2, but not the 3rd one, because actually my Tent is hosted on a service that doesn't ever let me permanently delete content, or I can't verify that I've actually deleted it. So before you see anything, you're given the option of what content would you like and under what terms. You don't have to accept any of it, but if you want to, you and I have now entered into a bargain. And that contract can be anything that I want it to be. We're working with a couple of legal groups to come up with machine-readable ways of doing this. So building the legal Legos that let you say, okay, there's a standard term for you must delete this when I send it out, but the number of days is fill in the blank. So maybe I'll say, okay, 30 days is fine because your provider won't do it for 14. And then you can set, as I said, kind of a filter for which of these you want to go in, and this can all happen automatically. The idea of having to go through this for every person is insane. As soon as I create a post, it goes from whatever application, and anyone can build any app on Tent. It's like HTTP. If you don't like Firefox, you can go home and make a new browser from scratch if you're so inclined. Anybody can make any Tent app. Anyone can make a Tent server because it's just a protocol. Anyone can implement whatever they want on top. Anyone can create a new kind of post or a new profile info. So I have, let's say, and I do have some Tent apps on my phone. If I were to make a post, it would go from here to AT&T Center and then to my Tent server. And then if you're following me on Tent, that post will be sent to you if you're following that particular post type. A search engine can exist by just being another Tent entity or Tent user. So in addition to you following me, let's say we have a real-time search engine that also follows me. So all of my public posts that it's subscribed to go directly to it. And our search right now works a little bit faster than Twitter's does, actually, but we can do it for all content. And we don't own that content, and we don't control it. So somebody else did. You make it. You can run it on your own server. You can use a hosting provider. And all of this can show up in real time. Possibly, our sort of long-term model is like email. Everybody using email? Who's not using email? Got some broken hands in here. About 90% of the world's email users are on one of 3 service providers: Gmail, Yahoo, and Microsoft Outlook. The other 10% are on corporate email. There's probably a lot of Stanford.edus in here. Are you guys on, like, they switched to Google Apps now, or is it still Stanford? Google Apps. Okay, so you're part of that first group. But a lot of other organizations are running their own for corporate reasons. But if you want to, you can also set up your own email server. Most people don't because it's an insane waste of time. There's a lot of decent email providers out there. There's a wide choice of vendors. Those people all offer different optimizations. Some of them are super privacy conscious. Others, like Gmail, are a great service that's very reliable and free, but in exchange, they mine your data so that they can advertise to you. That's a great trade-off for a lot of people, and that's fine. It's not a trade-off I want to make, but it's fine for other people. So we want to see something similar evolve. We've got a few dozen crazy people who run their own servers just because they want to or they can, which is great. There's 2 other Tent hosts, and we run a Tent host, so those are your 3 big ones, and we divide most of the big users across them. And some people, they don't like the way we wrote our server, so they write a server of their own from scratch. Nobody likes the way we design applications, which is fine because we're not good designers, and they go make their own again from scratch. People say, oh, I made a really pretty Tent app. I'm going to put it on the App Store and sell it and make money now. There's a lot of people who made money on the web and email who are definitely not the creators of the web and email. These are open ecosystems, which AOL woke up one day and said, the web is really interesting. There's a lot more content on here than we have, and we'd rather have 10%. We'd rather own 10% of a market that's 100 times bigger than own 100% of a market that's 100 times smaller. So we can either have a very small walled garden, we control everything, or we can control a lot less, but have what are less worth a lot more because there's more people on it. The web is a heck of a lot more valuable than AOL was. And there's stuff that, not because they're evil, but just they wouldn't have ever let anyone do. The same thing's true with everything that's currently centralized. Just because people are operating a business or they have legal obligations, try finding a credit card processor online that will allow you to sell pornography. Nothing illegal about selling pornography, but almost no credit card processor wants the drama, basically. So they say, you know what? You want to start up an adult images site? You need to find someone else. We will not allow you to process money, and that is extremely limiting to people who are in that industry. You don't want that anywhere. You don't want a single party who has the liability of intermediating conversations. There are some things that I'd like to say or do in my personal life, but I actually wouldn't want to run the service that everyone else was saying or doing those things through, because there are going to be lawsuits. People are going to show up. This isn't fun. So we've come up with a thesis that we've looked at what's worked and what hasn't worked in the past, and we're starting to build from scratch. I'll mention really quickly around adoption. There's a reason that the distributed open social services have not taken off. Like, there's a reason that they don't get really big. And it's the same reason that Facebook did get really big. Everybody's seen like The Social Network at some point, hopefully. Not super accurate historically, but interesting couple of lines. The adoption strategy for Facebook was really clear. At the time, MySpace was big, Friendster was still pretty huge, but huge meant a few million users. They went after very tightly connected groups of people, so universities, where you don't need the whole world to be online. You just need to convince a few thousand people, and that is your whole world. That's called network effects, the idea that the guy who invented Ethernet, which you don't see a lot of these days, but are the wires that almost all of our internet goes through. named somebody Metcalf, and he has a law about telecommunication systems. It says the value of a telecommunication system is proportionate to the number of connected nodes. What that means is we want to figure out how valuable telephones are. The question is how many are there that can talk to each other? If there's one telephone in the world, it has 0 values because there's nothing to connect to. If there's 2 telephones, it has value of 1. If there's 3, it's a value of 3, and this rises geometrically. A social network with 1 person on it has 0 value. You want to get to a real amount of value, you have to have a lot of people, but not just a lot of random people, a lot of people who want to interact with each other. There are small communities of people who have very serious personal politics, but generally speaking, the rest of their friends don't. So they go where the content is, whatever. Our strategy is not around the social graph. We assume that no one is going to know anyone on intent for a long time. So we're working primarily, well, we are, but other people are building social apps. But we're building the services that are really useful if you don't know anyone else. Dropbox is really useful if you don't know anyone else. Evernote is really useful if you don't know anyone else. But there's extra value when you can share stuff. There's a lot of like the productivity services of the world rather than the communication services, at least the social communication services. I think that is where I will stop so that we can open this up a little bit more. Anything that's brimming on top of people's minds right now? I know we just went through a lot of stuff. Anything that someone wants to go back to that wasn't clear?
It's something like a privacy concern, or let's say users' ability to control their own data. That would work even in theory only if the entire architecture of communication is within the dense scheme of things. Right? So if you send an email to somebody who uses Gmail and the whole thing takes time.
So this is interesting, especially when we talk about how, yeah. Oh, yeah. So when you're dealing with any communication system, but Tent in this example, if you're dealing with someone who is outside of that system, everything sort of breaks. And this is absolutely true. So let's say I was publishing my blog through Tent. I'd probably do 2 things. One, I'd send out blog posts as Tent posts. That's fine for people who are on Tent. For everyone else, I'll still make my blog available on the web. So the majority of content that I'm currently sharing elsewhere will continue to be shared in the same way, but there might be certain things like my location, which it requires a constant back and forth. So Tent is a requirement for that. For other things, it's, this should just talk to someone else. Email is a really easy example. So I have an email server here. I've got a Tent server here. Here's all my friends who are just on email. Here's all my friends who are on Tent. Here's my messaging app. So if I want to send messages to somebody who's not on Tent, it goes from my Tent app to my Tent server to my email server, which is also a Tent app, and then out in the world to email. So same as normal, I just put in an extra block in the middle. If I want to send it to somebody who's on Tent and who's on email, it's just going to go from my Tent message app to my Tent server to their Tent server. And there are things where I should actually not see any of this as a user. I just know I'm talking to you. And then it knows the rest and eventually moves things over. So it's a pretty standard, how do we move things over from backwards compatibility? And none of the super sensitive stuff should be shared outside of it or in a situation where you can't protect it. Location's a really, really interesting one because what you don't want to do is broadcast your actual location to everyone, even your friends or other activists, for example. So what you do is you use bounding boxes. So I don't want to tell you where I am unless you're also in the same place. I don't want to just guess at any given point because my guess is always going to be where I am. So I can't even tell you too much. So what happens is I say, where are you? You say, I'm in North America. I say, really? So am I. I'm in the United States. You say, wow, so am I. I'm in the Western United States. I say, that's amazing. I'm in California. And you say, oh, I'm not. And so all you know is that I'm in California, and all I know is that you're in the Western U.S., but somewhere that isn't California. And obviously, these aren't human messages. These are just packets going back and forth. So this happens programmatically. And it happens every time that you move more than a certain number of meters, and et cetera, et cetera. You can apply the same thing to scheduling. So not even where I am now, but where I plan to be based on my calendar. So right now, I'm in Delaware, but I plan to be at Stanford on January 17th. Or actually, sometime in January, I will be in Northern California and so on. And so we can actually programmatically schedule meetings that way without actually revealing my entire schedule. And so there's a lot of things that you just couldn't do without a real-time communication system. Everything else, published everywhere. So just like I might have 3 categories of photos. The first one is available to everyone. And the second one is Creative Commons, so anywhere I can publish with Creative Commons is fine. And the third is going to be a tent-only thing because I need an ability to enforce that. So it's a big problem, and eventually you have more things you want to control as well. With any of the communication stuff, like Tor is amazing, but it depends on having like your country's intranet, the network inside, say, the US, is then connected to the internet by a bunch of cables leading out of the US. If they cut those cables, we now are not on the internet anymore. There is no piece of software in the world that will let me connect because this is a hardware problem. There is no wire. This happened recently in Syria for a few weeks. Is that done yet? Are they back online? Yeah, back. So this has become a recent tactic of people. Iran wants to permanently get rid of their internet connection. Done. So what you end up needing is a very different piece of technology that's, again, Tor compatible. You need to say, okay, we don't have the internet anymore. Maybe we don't even have the intranet. So now we need wireless mesh networking. And so having a full stack of technology is the eventual goal for all of this. The idea that if I want to call you right now, signal's going to go from my phone to the nearest AT&T tower to traverse a network, fine. Let's say you're on Verizon, the nearest Verizon tower, which then sends a signal to your phone, which is a little nuts since we're 7 feet away. Both of our phones have, say, Wi-Fi in them, so they should probably connect directly. But if the range of both of our phones' Wi-Fi is 100 meters, let's say, and the person I want to talk to is actually 150 meters over there, what I want to do is send the signal encrypted to you, who then send it the other way, and that's enough. So that would be like wireless mesh. If we took all of the wireless devices in the world and just had them talk to each other, rather than talking to wherever the Wi-Fi is in this room is then got an Ethernet cable going away. We could actually get rid of a lot of those cables for a lot of kinds of messaging, but that's a huge undertaking and would have to involve a lot of devices. But until we get down to like the wire level, like the physical hardware, everything we do is just until someone decides to start cutting cords. So we have to pick somewhere to start, what the cornerstone is, and move out. But most of this stuff gets very ambitious very quickly because you do need either everybody on the same system or to build whole new systems, to build levels of redundancy, et cetera. It's a long answer. Sure.
What are your, realistically speaking, what are your expectations for the technologies on a stable filter?
So it depends on which one, because they have obviously very, very different realities on the ground. We are very interested in, say, the Iranian or the Syrian example. Tent works great if they cut off the outside internet inside the country. So if you and I are both living in Iran and we both have tent servers and goodbye outside internet, we can't communicate with our friends here in the US anymore, but we can communicate with each other still in the same way. So there's a lot of possibilities around negotiating even within very enclosed spaces. There are different compromises that different cultures, different societies, and different governments are willing to make, almost all of which are mutually exclusive. What's most interesting is that historically there's been a sort of, building these has been a lot like sending a spacecraft to Mars. You have to test all your systems here, you have to know exactly what you want and just hope it's going to work when you land. There are no two regimes in the world that you would use the same tactics to try to overthrow, so why are we sending these same tools to all of them? Historically, all of this has been around, I'm going to give you a software distribution and you're going to go use it, and we can say, this is a great tool for activists. Well, that is not a one-size-fit-all for anyone, anywhere. What we need are a basic set of, like, basic tools. I mean, Lego isn't even a good example. It's like a hammer that anybody can then build the right house for them, and for somebody that's built out of mud, and for somebody else that's built out of wood. So I guess the way that we approach it is saying, we want to give the primitives, the basic components, so that people can come up with solutions that are useful for them. I think that we've seen what happens for the past 30 years when we try to make one-size-fits-all technology and mail them over somewhere and hope that they work. There are some cases that works pretty well. Tor is a great one. But China is now rapidly evolving their response to Tor, so Tor doesn't really work in China anymore. You need basic primitives that different communities are able to leverage for their own purposes, and that starts to get, there's a long tail of different kinds of approaches. So I don't have a one-size-fits-all answer for, we expect to see 25% of change in place X, but there are different places where this could be used in very different ways, and eventually it becomes about integrating with a longer-term strategy. So is it about, are we trying to mobilize like consciousness raising, in which case what we need is just a very simple piece of communications technology which may or may not need to be censorship resistant? Are we just trying to raise awareness and we're allowed to speak freely but we can't assemble freely? Are we trying to organize a physical overthrow of someone? What are our goals? What's the context? So varies highly, and it's, we is currently five of us. Jonathan is one of the other architects of Tent. We have three others in various places who are full-time. That's like our particular, well, that's like the foundation and the company. As of the rest of the community, that's like saying, what are the internet's goals for the overthrow regime? There's a lot of people there who don't agree, and some of them are those regimes. So when I say "are," I mean the group of people who do what I tell them most of the time, rather than the other exciting world of people who don't.
This is my second question. So the popularization of Tor from a broader political context is suggesting that and in a world where even everyday governance and regulation is put in jeopardy. Things that you and I consider good things, right?
Yeah.
Financial accountability, or in more sinister terms, sending harassing threats.
Absolutely.
Things like that. Can you discuss a little
Yeah.
bit more the pros and cons of integrating and promoting systems?
You're absolutely right. Tor is, what? Oh, yeah, question. How do we, short version of this question. There are maybe potentially nefarious uses of technology that could be used in good ways. What I will not make as an argument is guns don't kill people, keep people kill people, because I don't think anybody's buying that at this point. So tools can be used in all sorts of different ways by different people. I don't think that, I should back up. Tor is a really interesting case, even inside the US. There are factions of the US government that have tried on multiple occasions to make it illegal to use Tor. There are other factions of the government that pay for the continued development of Tor financially. The State Department loves Tor. They think it's the best thing in the history of the world. The FBI would like to really put everyone in jail who's involved with it. And that's because increasingly, if you see a ransom demand go through somewhere, if you see people buying drugs online, they're probably using Tor because it's a safe, sane way of doing it. But also every dissident in the history of the world, everyone who is accessing information that might be considered inappropriate or illegal by some, is also using it. In the case of Tor, I would say that the good far outweighs the bad, as is the case with most technology. The question when you look at a new tool is, what does this make possible that wasn't possible before? The people who tend to get excited about this are people who have strong politics or extra legal behavior in one way or another. So yes, criminals are always going to be some of your first adopters because, hey, I can make it harder to get caught now. That is not true of the long term. So oftentimes the people who see the most immediate use are really kind of nefarious. I think that it's short-sighted for us to say that the only reason people don't do something is because they aren't physically capable of doing it, essentially. I would have sent that ransom note if I'd had Tor to do it with. There's a lot of other ways of enforcing good behavior. So we can say, I think something like Silk Road is going to continue to thrive because there aren't any social consequences of using illicit drugs. In fact, there are fewer if you're using something like Silk Road than if you're buying them somewhere where you may be contributing to urban crime, say. If you have behavior that is socially unacceptable, you have other enforcement mechanisms that are non-technical that you can use. So yeah, by all means, there's sometimes when you want to build a fence to keep the neighbors from coming into your yard, and by fence I mean like wall with turrets. There's other times where you want to say it's in everyone's best interest if we both stay on our own side of the yard and we put up a nice white picket fence. There are other enforcement mechanisms which are not complete, and for people who are going to do some really nasty things, they're going to do some really nasty things. I have a very long-term running argument with a friend about stalking behavior and how what the appropriate digital response is when someone's being stalked. Is it that everything needs to be private all the time, or are some tools that would encourage radical transparency? So imagine, you know how if you ever go to Google and you hover over a result, you see a cache, like an image of that page. Google has a copy of a lot of information, which means there's probably some stuff that's really not nice about a lot of us on Google that we can't get rid of, even if we take the actual site down. Well, let's imagine everything that you encountered on a computer never went away. It's only going to be if it's public. So if you publish something to a blog, to a tweet, and it's a public post, anybody can now see this, and it will never go away. You can't delete that content. We've all posted things accidentally. We've sent emails we shouldn't send, etc. Something like this would be phenomenal for encouraging transparency. It would keep a lot of really bad behavior that skates by because people are published recklessly, but then try to hide it again. It would make a lot of that go away. But it would also make it really hard for, say, stalking victims to hide their new identity or location. My feeling is that if you're going to have more transparency, if you're a stalking victim, I think the best thing in the world you could do would be put a webcam outside your front door and post it online for everyone to see. So be like, by the way, if anything happens to me, or if you just want to watch, there's more people who would be willing to defend a stalking victim while they're being stalked than there are people who want to stalk people. And so the question is, what other ways can you shut this behavior down socially? And I'm not of the belief that there's a bunch of people who want to go do really bad things. I think things that people want to do may or may not be acceptable in certain situations for ethical or non-ethical reasons.
Even there, though, you're talking about deterrence today.
Yeah.
You're talking about socially constructed deterrence.
Yes.
That involve personal interactions. But into our world that's increasingly less personal. And we live in our worlds that are increasingly more connected on the internet, people in Tibet or Africa.
Yeah.
Those social deterrents become less effective.
I think they're changing a lot, and I think it's still too early to know how those dynamics will shape up, because you're absolutely right. We interact far less in person with people than we used to. I work 12 hours a day out of my house 7 days a week. I leave once a week to go to the grocery store, and then once every couple of months for a week to travel. I don't know my neighbors. I don't deal with those people. And so even just like, am I playing music too loud? I don't see them outside and smile or frown, and therefore they're like minor behavioral changes aren't enforced. The world is changing for sure, and some of the mechanisms we've traditionally relied on are disappearing. At the end of the day, we're going to have to find new, better ways to manage this, because it's kind of like an arms race on the technical side. If anybody had the idea, it's going to get implemented eventually. I'm not saying that's a good excuse to go do something, but if it's going to happen, we should take the time now, if we know what's going to happen, to try to find better ways to deal with it, because the reality is that technology, that tool, that ability will always be just waiting down the road. So there's going to be some way scarier stuff than we've seen so far. Silk Road, I mean, even if we just look at opinion polls of the last election, a lot of people are changing their opinion on recreational drug use. A lot fewer would be changing their opinion on human trafficking, which you could easily run, and I'm sure someone is running in the same way. Nobody thinks that's a good idea. But the same technology would allow them to do that. And so this is now a technical reality. This may happen. So we need to start thinking about what are the other ways that we can decrease the incidence of human trafficking, and what are ways other than let's go unplug this server, which we can't find anymore, or trace down those people through their financial transactions, which we can't do anymore. I think we could say similar things about the interstate highway system made it easier to escape from crime. But I think the benefits outweigh the risk, but even if it didn't, market forces are going to say, if we can move things around faster for cheaper on roads where you can drive faster, somebody's going to build those eventually. If we know that's coming, how can we engineer a society, or in some cases bring in new pieces of technology or change the way governance works to deter what we can universally agree are unacceptable behaviors. I think increasingly we are going to... Okay, so think about pornography 40 years ago versus pornography today. There is a far greater variety and greater access to a variety of very colorful content. And so people, a 14-year-old might have barely been able to get a hold of a copy of Playboy in the 70s, whereas now they can see some ridiculous things that are at the very, very far ends of human predilection. That diversity is creating a really, really different set of sexual norms. The people who maybe wouldn't have been exposed to certain content, which now primarily defines their sexual attraction. The same thing's true with everything. We have, what the internet did was not give us the same content we watched on television or the news. It was give us content that was only interesting to like you and 15 other people, and they were living in different parts of the world. When you don't have to be physically co-located to share information instantly, you can now have this website that's devoted to something that you and 15 other people in the world have as a hobby. That means that that hobby is going to develop a lot more. And the same thing's true of some really weird behavior. We're going to be dealing with some more extreme versions of human behavior as things move on, because we deal with people around us less. And family and neighbors and coworkers are a great form of social insulation, because you're forced to deal with every day on public transportation or out mowing your lawn people who probably have nothing in common with you ideologically aside from maybe religion and some basic cultural stuff from living in the same country. If you didn't have to deal with them anymore, you only dealt with people you wanted to deal with, you become more like those people as opposed to having this sort of neutralizing, everyone's brought to the center effect of interacting with other people. This is just a reality of where we are, and it's going to cause some weird behavior. I don't have an answer for how we solve that, but I think it is something we need to start thinking about on a broader scale, because there's going to be some weird stuff happening. I mean, people are going to get weirder because there's more room for people to evolve personally in the direction they want to go. To say nothing of like crazy stuff's happening. Let's look at 3D printing, for example. Historically, I've been limited in terms of like what I can put in my home by what I can make myself or buy at a store that I can drive to. Okay, then we get something like Amazon. I can now order anything from anywhere that'll come to my house. Still pretty good, but again, we've got economies of scale here, so it's only worth making something crazy if enough people are going to buy it to support it. And setting up manufacturing has sort of an N+X. It costs a certain amount of money just to set up your assembly line, and then an incremental cost for every actual object you produce. That doesn't exist with 3D printing. There's no N, there's just the S. And the incremental cost is higher, but it's just me that's paying for it. So instead of it costing $100,000 to set up an assembly line and then $1 an item, maybe it's now costing me $10 an item, but it would have cost me $10 to buy the 100,000 plus one for my instance of it because of the supply chain. Confusing economic example, but anybody can now, and certainly as things evolve in the next few years, print out stuff that is weird, like 4 other people wanted, or they designed themselves. I think we're going to see this in almost every major like product vertical that we encounter, not just like consumer goods, but just every aspect of our life. We've seen it in information for sure for the past 20 years. We've seen the evolution of the communities coming together over things that, without making value judgments about whether we think those are good or bad or ethical or unethical, people of shared interest form communities who are geographically separate or who were too rare in their interest to possibly congregate before. That's changed. We're going to see that effect over everything as different technologies emerge in the next 2 years, and it's going to create broader varieties of people who are also dealing with each other less frequently, which will probably lead in some cases to decreased tolerance of each other. I think we could probably make an analogy here with the bizarre political discussions over the past few months and years. There seems to be a really, really polarizing set of discussions going on in this country that are largely because when I go to Google and search for Barack Obama, based on my email, which are going to contain people sending me fundraisers for various Democratic candidates, the results I see in Google are going to give me the view of the world they think I would be interested in, and generally speaking, I would be interested in the things that support my view of the world. So when you're in this filter bubble, where you're just sort of amplifying your existing tendencies or your existing beliefs, and you're dealing less, as you say, with normal people, or rather different people, there's a tendency to believe that what you think or what you're seeing is the only truth because you're not encountering the other information. You're not being forced to engage on a daily basis with people who share radically different beliefs. And that means that when you do have to share something, whether that's physical space, whether that's something like a country, or whether that's something like a tax code, you've had quite a long time to decide that your way is the only sane way. These other people are crazy, and there aren't that many of them anyway. And everybody you talk to agrees with you, and you just talk about how awesome this is. In some cases, that's great. If you're I'll be careful here. If you're, say, recovering from a religious cult, there's some not great religious organizations in America, and maybe 20 years ago, before the internet, you didn't have the ability to reach out to other survivors of that experience. The same thing's true of rape trauma. The same thing's true of stalking victims. The same thing's true of people who are board game enthusiasts. Anybody who's a community of shared experience or interest now can form. And they're going to deal with each other. And so where they once thought, this is probably a weird thing with me, I'm alone in the world, now this is actually the norm for their experience. They might not think that they are the majority, but they become much more embracing of that, and things continue to evolve.
I'm going to ask you not to pursue this line too far. Let's take it. It's been a long discussion, so if there are not other questions, we'll come back to it if you don't mind.
Things are going to get crazy. We can keep talking about this forever. Anybody else got any questions? Yeah.
So I have a question with, as now you're a 5-person company, obviously you hold these values, I trust you, that you care about privacy, and like you said, it's inconvenient to run your own server, so I'm probably going to use yours.
Or one of the 2 other commercial hosts that are out there. Sure.
But once again, until I built up how much I trust, there's people that run on this other too. As this comes to scale and you get more users, what can you do to verify, other than you seem like a nice guy, that I should trust you to build my stuff?
Right. So one, we want that never to happen. We don't want your stuff. We have to take your stuff right now because most people aren't going to set up their own thing to run. Every version of the protocol we release, we try to remove a centralized dependency. So DNS, for example. Eventually, what we'd like to do is have a physical appliance, just like you have a personal computer at home. It'd be great if you have a plug computer that you just set in, that you were responsible for your own stuff. The police come. I do not want search warrants. I don't want people raiding my data center. I don't want the legal challenge of, is this an appropriate word and should I be censoring people saying it? I really, really want everyone managing their own. We're not there yet technically, and it'll probably be a few years. Until then, a diversity of hosts some people, just like the payment companies, some payment companies are fine dealing and specialize in dealing with pornographic companies. Other ones only want squeaky clean people. Other ones just want to deal with software developers. So if you have any level of scale, you end up with niche or at least targeted providers who have very, very different arrangements with people. So we wanted for a while to have an option where you could have your data stored in Iceland if you wanted. So when you sign up, there's a $5 surcharge, and you can have your data stored in which of these political jurisdictions, which have very different laws about data retention and user privacy, would you like your stuff in? In some cases, if you're in the US, you don't actually want any of your communications stored outside, because once your communications are across international lines, they don't need search warrants. There will be people who care a lot about that. There will be people who say, what's the best performance I can get? There will be people who will say, how can we get this free? So diversity of hosts and a free market guarantees some level of options there. And the long-term goal for this and for everything is, and there's some people working, it's like Freedom Box, which is a little weird, but the idea of having a single device that you put in your house that would do all of these things. So it would be your wireless mesh node, it would be your tent server, it would be your Tor, whatever. And so ideally, we're eventually removing the host from the middle, because I don't think it's, in the long-term healthy, it's necessary now. Yeah?
Can you do it a different way? You have the protocol set up so that I can say, I want my data on 6 different servers, distributed randomly, with 6 different encoding systems, so that if you're going to break it down, if somebody steals the data from you, they only get a random part of my stream encrypted in quite different way.
So, for example, So some of this is protocol related. Some of it's just how you implement your hosting. So if you're using, say, Amazon Web Services, which most people are for anything images, they do a service called S3, Simple Storage, which is any binary file, so a movie, a text file, an image. That's probably where you're putting it because it scales linearly. It's great. But I don't trust Amazon as far as I can throw them. So if you ever put data up there, you want it to be encrypted, so Amazon can't do anything to it without your permission. By all means, take my servers. You're not going to be able to read anything on it, and we can go a lot further than that. There's some really cool things you can do legally while keeping, like, the data can stay in the US encrypted and the decryption keys are in Iceland. You can get really, really creative with this, and we do a lot of that now, and we'll be doing more as we move on. So absolutely. And frankly, that is certainly more likely you're going to see it in these kinds of movements because it's a priority. But your Gmail account should do this. They don't, but they should. And this is true of a lot of other services. That should be a basic requirement whenever you go shopping for a digital service, is exactly what you're describing.
You're creating basically a different set of legal regimes that you can ensconce yourself into. But the problem it creates is, let's say, as a producer, my knowledge of not only the different terms that I want to offer, but what is defensible in what countries, under what conditions the should be there.
Yeah.
And thinking of trade as an example, it almost feels to me like when I'm reading the tweet stream, I'm also clicking on it in terms of service, not just for the Twitter service, but for every tweet. How feasible is that? So
we're kind of back to the earlier discussion here. At some point, every developer I know feels similar to what you're describing, and says, you know what, I don't want this. It's too much. Like, I have some lawyers who are activist friends who want to create new forms of law and solve this problem by educating people. And the developers I know say, you know what, let's just encrypt everything, let's route it in ways that they can't find, and let's just circumvent it entirely because, frankly, it's easier and faster, and we aren't dependent on a bunch of people who don't share our ideology. Both of those are going forward full steam. I expect something like Creative Commons, where there's like 6 different things, will happen for terms of service. So it's like, we do or do not encrypt your data. We do or do not respond to these sorts of government actions. We do or do not. So you look at it, and there's a couple of clear symbols for the big ticket items. And there's a few third-party services. TOSDR is one, terms of service, didn't read, that basically goes through, and they're a team of lawyers who read every terms of service contract that are out there for big service, and then say, this is good, this is bad, here's why. A lot more of that's going to happen, as there's just going to be a lot of PR fiascos. Really what it comes down to is none of the companies want your data, except for the ones that are like directly trying to monetize it. I mean, they don't want the headache of it. They want you as a customer, they need your stuff for that, but most companies are really busy building a good product. They don't want to deal with other stuff. We have a few friends who run, say, payment companies, and they, whenever they're going to make a terms of service change, they give us a call and say, what do you think for this? And we're like, actually, this is horrible, and here's why. And they say, well, all right, we're going to do it anyway. But eventually you want to, even within the same provider, say, like, I want different product options from you that have different terms of service. So, like, I don't, like, you want to add this new feature, but it makes the terms of service change. I don't want that feature. Let me just keep the old one. And there's going to be, the EU's already getting insane. Their parliament's nuts about some of this stuff. Their heart's in the right place, but they're overreaching, in my opinion. As there are more public fiascos, Congress here will have to get involved. Eventually, you'll probably see something in, like, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights about, like, the basics that have to be true. The industry standard practices are still evolving enough that it's probably not the right time to say it's pass a series of laws like requiring minimum standards. That's certainly what has happened with, say, health data, and it's been prohibitive. No one's building services because it's just nuts. And the cookie law in the EU. So, yeah. European data laws are getting truly bizarre. Most of the responsible companies here will not put hardware into Europe anymore because it's really dangerous. The EU's trying right now to say that if a European citizen's data is in a US company's server in the US, EU laws have to apply. It's good, if that were to ever to happen and were upheld in US courts, it means that Europeans are just not going to be welcome on any services in the US. This is as much a headache for developers as anybody else, but again, some of them are political. They're all there's a generally, like, libertarian bent in that community who just don't want to be stuck with the fetters of whatever. But their solutions are usually technical, and, like, how can we just avoid this being an issue? And you get solutions like BitTorrent, which are a really great way of circumventing certain aspects of this, or something like Silk Road or Tor. So their solutions have largely been, let's build something that makes this practically nullified. That will be a good solution for certain kinds of problems. It will not be a good solution for the long term, because, like, we need better literacy and we need better laws. And we also, in some cases, need to skip that step and just make better tools. all of these are going on simultaneously. All are going to have some really dark days at some point because that system you built that you thought was perfect actually isn't. And now everyone who ever bought drugs on Silk Road had their addresses exposed, and we don't have enough prisons. We don't have enough prisons now, but or we have too many prisoners, rather. So, yeah. We have to have better education, but I don't want to have to call my lawyer when I want to sign up for a new service. And as a consumer, I don't do that because that's insane, or maybe it's insane not to. But as a business operator, I do. I cannot sign. You get the same thing. You get a giant thing, but this one comes in the mail, and you have to actually sign it and notarize it and send it back. And we do have to call our lawyer every time this happens. We have a lot of people who have wanted to pay us when we were consulting who were like, under no circumstances will we do work for you with these terms. You're trying to make us liable for all of your future problems. Contract law was not really built to do what it's currently doing. There's a lot of chief counsels at companies that totally overreach. They're saying, my job is to totally protect the company, whereas you're not really protecting the company if you're screwing over the consumers. So it's a nightmare. It's going to get worse. Europe is going down a really crazy road, and there will be some good case law coming out of the Federal Circuit and Supreme Court in the next 18 months or so. I don't know if the results will be positive in my political view, but we'll have real decisions. So it's not clear, for example, whether a court can prosecute someone or convict them for violating terms of service. Is that have you broken the law, or is this a civil action and you violate a contract? Can these things be changed retroactively? Most terms of service say, this is what the rules are until we change the rules, after which you can't opt out, and it applies backwards, which means ignore everything else in this contract because we get to make it up as it goes, and you're stuck with whatever we decide. None of this, these are obviously these sound insane because they are, and it's just a weird evolution of law and technology that hasn't resolved itself socially yet. It will need social changes, it will need legal changes, and it will need technological changes, for sure.
I think we have time for one round of questions at most. If more than one question is there, please answer them all together, so you have 2 minutes to answer them at the end of it. The honors are yours, I guess.
Well, now I have 2.
1 minute apiece.
I guess I'll just ask one. You referenced before that there are some developers that come up with technical, that developers are more likely to come up with technical fixes to avoid laws,
Yes.
regulations, whatever.
Yeah.
I don't want to sound patronizing at all, because I think this is like a great idea, but how is Tent not a technical solution to what's fundamentally a political problem?
So it's a little of both. One, it is a technical solution as a short-term band-aid, but like I said, with something like Tor, these only work until somebody unplugs the internet at the government level because they get so upset about it. So you want to move what is technically possible forward and change the discussion. So we have licenses attached to every post, as I discussed. We have to build a completely new legal framework and do education around that. So that takes up a huge portion of our time and is totally non-technical. That kind of a social and legal approach wasn't possible without a certain level of enabling technology. We're the first system to try to do something like that as a programmatic interaction. So these do go, as much as they fight each other, they can and should go hand in hand for the big issues. And it's going to take a lot of different experiments, technically and legally, and probably, honestly, it's going to take a lot of people to die. And I don't mean in a war, I just mean some of the population has to age out because they aren't technically savvy. Or the people who are growing up today have I find the TSA horrifying and a crime against humanity. My younger cousins never lived in a world where that wasn't the norm, and so they don't find it offensive. My grandparents are extremely on the same wavelengths I am politically, but only about 80% of the things. Other stuff, my background academically is in gender theory. I'm not sure they ever met somebody who is transgendered, and so they don't have a sane position on that. They aren't bad people. They just haven't had a cause to sort out their thoughts on it. So I think a lot of people, and I think this starts like high school and up, feel like they've sort of checked out. Like, I don't need to be invested in this or care in this because this is somebody else's problem. We have to bring a lot of people who wouldn't otherwise be inclined to care about it into a discussion. Some of that won't happen until they're suddenly faced with a new technical reality. Something new is now possible. How do I respond to this? And then you have a discussion, and that results in a societal change, and that results in a legal change.